What is up, guys? It's your boy obbldude, and today I want to talk a little bit about the new profession, the new mining profession coming to Entropia Universe. To start off real quick, we got 50 ped here. We're going to do a 50 ped mining run at our favorite land area as always. We'll see what we can get out of this. But I wanted to make a video kind of talking about this new profession coming. And I think it's kind of interesting, and I kind of had some thoughts on it, and I kind of just wanted to make a video kind of talking about that for a little bit. So, the new profession, if you haven't heard, which I think most of you probably have by now, is space mining. Now, basically, from my interpretation of it, I think it's going to be probably similar to like EVE Online. I don't know if any of you have played EVE Online. In EVE Online, basically, the way you mine is you mine asteroids and things like that, and you get resources from the asteroids that you mine. And the way you mine those asteroids is basically you have a spaceship, you have attachments or probes for that ship, and then you kind of just orbit the asteroids and you mine out the asteroids and you get resources, and then you can sell it, whatever, all that kind of good stuff. So I'm thinking in Entropia it's probably going to be something similar to that, where you basically probably use a ship and then you go out in space and you're mining asteroids. Now, just to get the obvious stuff out of the way, I think it's kind of funny how Entropia is kind of just taking a profession from another game a little bit. Um, but that's besides the point. I think it could have a benefit to Entropia as a whole and have a benefit in the overall market if implemented correctly. Now, it's going to be kind of hard to say if it'll work or if it'll be a dead thing. I think it'll probably be popular at first, but whether or not it can sustain itself, I guess that's something to be seen. But I want to talk a little bit about the possible pros about doing this kind of profession and them adding this profession. Now, I don't know when it's going to end up coming out, but at some point it's probably going to be out. They've announced it, so it's most likely happening. And I have some thoughts on that. So, my first thing is I think it's going to really help the market of spacecrafts, right? I think this would be a huge opportunity for MindArc to be able to implement more spacecrafts and different spacecrafts and maybe different recipes to make these spacecrafts as well. Now, whether or not they're going to do that, it's probably unlikely because it's MindArc and they just usually don't go into depth with things like that, unfortunately. But it would be a huge opportunity to do something like that to really vitalize the spaceship and spacecraft market, to make crafting ships and making ships a lot more profitable and make a lot more sense to do so, more so than it is right now. On top of that, I think it's also huge because I think it can give a lot. Ooh, that was a nice hit. I think also it can give the space itself, like space, a whole nother reason to go there. Right now, space is really fundamentally there for two reasons, really, right? To go to a different planet, mine on a different planet, hunt on a different planet, or just visit another planet for whatever reason. Now, that's the one thing. And the second thing is obviously piracy, right? PvP. From my understanding, I haven't been in space before, but from my understanding, most of space is a PvP zone. And that is a huge opportunity for pirates specifically. And one of my concerns also with this is we're probably going to see a lot more piracy going on. And I don't think that's a bad thing. But I think if it gets too overcrowded, it could be. Chances are MindArc might end up making some adjustments to that. I'm not sure. But that gives a whole different kind of layer of gameplay, I feel like. Because now the pirates have even more of a chance to, I guess, pirate, right? Because people are going to be out in space, most likely in these PvP zones, mining these asteroids out. And as they're mining out these asteroids, they're probably just going to start shooting them and getting into dogfights and trying to destroy their ship in order to get their loot, which I think is kind of huge. depending on how it goes and how you look at it, it could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. I think it'd be a really fun element to be involved in, and I hope that they kind of keep some of the integrity of PvP in space, at least when this profession releases. However, also on top of it though, is as you're mining these asteroids, I think that gives a whole nother opportunity to not only find resources that already exist, but a good opportunity to create new resources that don't yet exist. And kind of like with other planets, that's kind of what they did. There's planets out there that exclusively have certain resources that you can only get on those planets, which I think is a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. And I think that they could kind of go in that same direction with the asteroid mining as well. So I think when it comes to mining in space or this asteroid space mining thing that they're introducing, I think it can give a lot of opportunity for a lot more different play styles and really give space a whole nother reason to go there. And the two things I'm really excited about is the potential of crafting ships and the potential of being a pirate. Now, I'm not going to lie. In the past, I've thought about being a pirate in this game, and I still do think about it. And once I heard that this was going to be a new profession, which, by the way, if you guys don't know, I've been advocating for a new profession in this game for a long time. Um, I think I think fishing would still be a really good addition to the overall game globally, not just on a planet, but that's just besides the point. But the fact that they're adding a new profession, I think, is huge. And the fact that they're adding the profession to be in space specifically, it's not necessarily a new profession, I guess, because we still have mining, right? But the area in which you're mining and having it be a separate kind of profession for that, I think is huge because it makes space more valuable, it makes ships more valuable, and it could even make the resources you find in space more valuable. And this is what I mean by that. So, for example, if you have, like, let's say, list mineable in an asteroid in space, just for an example, and let's say it's harder to get the list out in space because of dogfighting, for example, or the fact that you can get looted a lot easier, assuming that they keep all that kind of in game, right? Or in the space arena at least. Even though you can find lists pretty easily anywhere else, it does kind of increase the supply of lists potentially. But if some of that list supply kind of moves from off planet to asteroids, for example, it could potentially increase the price. Now, that's kind of a stretch because certain factors would kind of have to be in play for that to be a thing. However, just having known resources that are already in the game out in space could potentially bring up the prices. Now, that's a pretty big speculation, I'm not going to lie. But depending on how things go and how they kind of work the loot pools and everything, it could be a possibility. Now, another thing, if we could get new loot specifically, I think if the PvP aspect stays the way it is now, and they add new loot in space, different types of loot in space, I think that not only will make that loot more valuable, but at the same time, if there's a good enough use case for those resources and that loot, I don't think there'll ever be an issue of getting a decent profit out of crafting anything out of that loot either. Because if the loot's harder to get and there's a bigger chance of losing it, that fundamentally brings up the price of not only the resources themselves, but the items that can be crafted from those resources. And I think this is a little less speculative, if anything. simply because even if they only add a handful of specific loot that can only be found on asteroids, for example, all you really need is one recipe with one resource ingredient from space or from asteroids, and that alone can be enough to really make some new recipes and other recipes possibly more valuable. And again, especially the spaceship recipes. Now, I think the biggest things that are really just going to come out of this is spacecraft recipes or making spacecrafts in general, the turbos to go into space, and any kind of weapon systems for that spacecraft as well. I'm not super well versed in how spaceships and dogfights in space really work. I was kind of trying to learn a little bit more about that before fully trying to get into it. But I feel like those main things are really what's going to help drive the market as far as mining in space and asteroid mining in Entropia Universe. Because ultimately, you get a spacecraft and it can last you quite a bit of time, assuming that you don't get blown up, right? But now, if you're talking about mining, now there's a whole new theme to that, right? Because now you're spending more time in space than you normally would, most likely, because you're mining asteroids in space. It might take a little longer to mine those. Depending on how they set everything up, it might take some time to actually mine them and all that. So you're spending more time in space, which is a higher risk of getting shot down, which means people are going to end up going through spacecrafts a lot more than they really normally would, which ultimately can then really help that market out. And at the same time, I think it can help the resource market out a little bit as well. Or maybe even if prices don't really go up, I think just having the opportunity to get into more dogfights out in space and have more of an opportunity to shoot more spaceships down in space overall gives you a possibly better chance of getting more loot at one time. So, for example, if you're a pirate and you shoot down a few ships that have been mining asteroids, and let's say two of them actually have been mining for a little bit and have a pretty good amount of loot on them, that you might, prices might stay about the same, prices might not go up, but the amount of loot that you can get at one time can potentially go up. Now, if you're a low or mid-level player, this might not be the case, or it might not apply, which is very possible. But I guess it really just depends on how that system's going to work. I do think they're going to introduce new skills that are going to apply to that. I think some of the skills they might add, not really sure what those could be, but I do think that we will see new skills come in with this new profession, not just for the asteroid mining aspect, but potentially also for the PvP aspect, or at least they should, I feel like. But overall, I think in a lot of ways, this new profession can be a really good thing for many aspects of the game. You have your PvP, you have the new profession, you have the chance of getting more loot at one time. You have the chance of possibly being more efficient when you mine because you are using ships and possible attachments, like in Eve, for example, probes to mine those asteroids, but also efficiency in being a pirate as well, because it might cost a little less or maybe around the same to shoot down one ship and get all their loot if they have enough of it versus just mining it yourself. And that increases the PvP game. It gives more content in the game in more than just one way. You have more content in the sense of now you're in space, you are mining asteroids with your ship, or you can just be a pirate. And I'm not going to lie, once this profession comes out, I am going to try the asteroid mining profession itself, but I think overall, unless they change something, unless they make a lot less PvP zones or make this in non PvP areas, um, I do have a suspicion that maybe where you mine the asteroids might be in a non PvP area, but then you might have to fly from that non PvP area through a PvP area to then get to a planet to then land and either put it in storage, sell it, whatever. So I think that could be a very big possibility where you might not be able to fundamentally do PvP when someone's actively mining the asteroids potentially. But at the very least, you're probably going to have to go through a PvP area to then store your loot that you got from that asteroid. But I will say, once this profession does come out, I do plan on trying out the asteroid mining profession, space mining profession, whatever you want to put to it. I do plan on doing that part of it, but I'm actually seriously more so looking at being a pirate. I've thought about it in the past. I thought about just hanging around space, trying to get a somewhat mid-level spaceship, spend a little bit on it, and get the appropriate weapon systems or however that works. I don't know if they come pre-built depending on what you buy or if you have to buy a separate attachment. It's always been my impression in Entropia Universe that it would be a separate attachment, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I know the base level ships like the Slipner and shoot, I forget what it's called. It almost looks like a little fighter jet thing. I know those cannot have weapons, I believe, but other ships can. I don't know if it's just motherships or what. But regardless, I do plan on actively putting in a little bit more, saving up a little bit more in Entropia to potentially have the opportunity to do that. Because at one point I was thinking of trying out the pirate thing just for a little bit, hanging around space, seeing if I can find ships flying around in PvP and try to knock them down and just kind of have some fun with it. And, if I get blown up, it's whatever, right? As long as I don't have any loot on me, not really a big deal. But now with this space mining profession, I almost feel like being a pirate, the piracy aspect of the game could be a lot more economical and a lot more worth doing potentially, because now you don't just got to bank on someone going from one planet to the next and hope that they're bringing loot from one planet to the next, because there's potentially a lot of people in space right now where they're just going to another planet and they got nothing on them, right? They might hang out at Calypso like me all the time, and they might end up going to Foma just to do some mining, and maybe they haven't gotten to Foma yet to do the mining, so they don't have any resources, right? You kind of almost have to bank on them. You almost have to catch them coming from like Foma or another planet with loot to then bring it to Calypso, because ultimately, I don't know if it's still the case, but I know at one point it was pretty much only worth selling resources and loot over on Calypso because it had the better market. So a lot of people would take their loot from Foma and other places and bring it back to Calypso because they had a better chance of selling it there. And then you kind of almost had to catch someone at the perfect time to be like, you almost had to catch someone at the perfect time coming back from Foma or something with loot to come back to Calypso to sell it, right? And ultimately, that would be kind of an easy thing to kind of pinpoint. You kind of just situate yourself on the other side of space away from Calypso and just kind of look to see where the person's trajectory is going. So, like, if they're coming from Foma or that direction and they're heading towards Calypso, you can kind of make the assumption that, hey, maybe they're bringing loot back to Calypso to go sell on Calypso. And then you kind of almost have to hope that that's what they're doing so that you can knock them down and then hopefully get a decent loot out of that. But now with this asteroid mining, I feel like it's going to be a lot more plausible to get more loot and have a higher chance of shooting down a ship that has loot in those PvP zones from just mining the asteroids themselves, right? So in a lot of ways, I think it's an addition to the piracy gameplay of space and a chance to get more loot at one time for potentially less, if not the same amount that you normally would if you were just mining regularly, or with any other profession, right? One concern I somewhat have for right now with this new asteroid mining profession is getting new resources, new recipes for those resources, or, just new resources in general that virtually have no use case. A lot of people know, I don't know if this is still the case. I know a while ago, this was the case. It might still be the case, maybe or maybe not. But for example, treasure hunting. There's a reason why I don't bother treasure hunting. Now, you can only treasure hunt on one planet as it is, and I think that's probably one big issue with it. But at the same time, the main reason why I don't really care about treasure hunting or do it is simply because the resources you get have no markup, because there's really nothing that you can do that people want with it. So one of my biggest concerns is getting new loot, having a new loot pool, having added different loots that you get only in space, and then there's really nothing you can do with it. There's no markup to it. People don't really want to craft the things that they can be crafted for, things like that. Ooh, that was a good hit. So that's kind of one of my big concerns, is that it kind of turns into a second treasure hunting flop, basically, where you're getting new resources, possibly new recipes and things to use it for, and no one really cares to use it because it just doesn't really enhance the game at all. And MindArc is very well known for creating systems and resources and loots that virtually have no use whatsoever. Um, Not so much with mining, I would say, but with hunting, there are a lot of hunting resources that you get for crafters where people just aren't really crafting them. And people aren't really crafting them because when they craft them, no one really buys them. Um, you know, there's quite a few crafting recipes that people just don't even touch. And especially with hunting, there's a lot of stuff that you get for certain crafting recipes that are virtually almost useless, because people just aren't crafting them. Because when they do, no one's really buying them. And that's one big thing that I'm kind of worried about, is just we're going to get new stuff, new loot, things like that, and they're going to virtually be worthless. Similar to the treasure hunting flop and other flops from MindArc. I hope that doesn't happen. I hope they kind of do things in a better way. I hope that if there are new resources that you can only get from asteroids, I hope they make recipes that can be useful for the game and useful to people. That way people are willing to buy them. That way crafters are willing to craft them. That way, once you mine them out, you can actually sell them, and not only sell them, but sell them at a markup. Because there are items in this game that have a markup, but no one buys them. So that's like my probably number one big concern with this new profession, is that we're going to get a lot of dead resources from it. Now, I do hope that you can still find some stuff on asteroids, like, for example, you know, there's copper and gold in Entropia Universe that are really hard to find on planet. And one thing that I kind of hope, that I think would be really cool, is a higher drop rate for those items. Now, yes, fundamentally that could drop the markup as well for those items like gold and copper, etc. However, if you bump those up just a little bit, right? Like, so for example, if you're averaging a percentage of finding gold or copper at 1 or 2% in a certain location on a certain planet, maybe a certain type of asteroid, maybe you have an increased 2% of finding copper or an increased 1% of finding gold. So instead of a 1-2% to find gold or a 2-3% chance of finding copper on a certain planet, maybe you could have a 3% chance of finding gold on a specific asteroid, or a 5% chance of finding copper on a specific asteroid, which might drop the premiums a tad bit, but as long as those numbers aren't bumped up too high, shouldn't be too much of an issue. And that is one other thing I do kind of hope I see out of this new profession, is not only new resources on these asteroids, but existing resources, but maybe the harder to find resources on planet might be slightly easier to get on the asteroids. I think that would be a really cool thing, and I think that could actually really help the market a lot as well, because gold does have a decent premium to it, or at least last time I checked. Maybe it's different now. I haven't really touched Entropia in the past 7 months or so. It's been a little bit, so they might have come down a little bit, or went up. Who knows? I haven't looked into it. But that is one thing I would like to see as well. And then, of course, another major concern that I do have for this new profession is potentially too much piracy, right? So at one point, I do know way, way back in the day, early days of Entropia, you could actually steal people's claims, potentially. Where if you got a claim and you left it sitting for too long and someone else came along, they could potentially get that claim. They did away with that because there was a lot of issues with that. And one of my concerns is something similar to that, but not really. So my other concern really is just too much piracy, where it almost becomes impossible to mine asteroids effectively, because the chances of getting shot down by someone else, by another ship, is really high. And depending on how this thing is rolled out, um, if the mining of asteroids is only in PvP zones in space, because I know if not the entire space is PvP, a lot of it is PvP. I don't know if there's safe zones in space at all. I'm not sure if all of space is PvP or not, or if just the majority of it is PvP. But one of the things I can definitely see potentially is an overused amount of piracy, mining asteroids in PvP areas in space. Now, chances are the barrier to entry to be a pirate is probably pretty high. It's probably not unattainable to a lot of people, but it's probably a high barrier to entry. I can't see spending 500 ped and being able to get into it. Maybe. Any of you guys that know about piracy in Entropia, some of you guys that know about, dogfights in space, things like that, might be able to shed some light on this in the comments. But I just don't see the barrier to entry of being a pirate in Entropia being 500 ped. I mean, if I had to guess, I could see like 1,000 ped barrier to entry just to get a baseline ship to be able to take out other ships. And then even still, that's probably like level 1, right? And then if you want to really like be a force to be reckoned with, you might have to spend 10,000 ped or maybe 5,000 ped. That's my guess. I don't know. Who knows? Barrier to entry might be 100 ped, but I doubt it, because I think the cheapest ship that you can put those turbo drive things on to get into space initially, I know the barrier to entry with that is like 100 ped. And with those ships, I don't even think you can put weapons on them or have weapons on them at all. If I had to guess, I'm pretty sure you would probably need a mothership to do this. And motherships aren't cheap at all. So if that is the case, where your only danger is really getting shot down by a mothership, then I think that concern isn't really a concern at that point. However, if they add new ships to lower that barrier of entry, depending on how low that barrier is, will depend on if there's an issue with it. I don't think that will really be an issue, though. as far as this new profession goes, because again, I think the only way that could really be an issue is if the barrier to entry to start shooting down ships in space is 100 ped. And I just don't see that happening because I don't think that's the case even today. And I don't think that's ever going to be the case. Like I said, I'm pretty sure you need like a mothership or something close to that in order to do PvP in space in the first place. Now, maybe not specifically motherships, but probably something close to that. So that probably won't be a huge concern regardless, as long as that's the case, right? Because as long as the barrier to entry to do space PvP is low, I mean high, then that probably won't be much of an issue. Now, my next question is basically how low is the barrier to entry going to be to mine these asteroids, right? Is it going to work like Eve, where you use your ship to mine these asteroids and you're in the ship the whole time? Which my guess is probably yes. And then my question is, okay, can I mine these asteroids with 100 ped ship? If I, and then do all I need to do is get a special attachment, put it on the ship, and then I'm good to go? Or do I need to purchase a different kind of ship, or maybe even a new ship for this profession specifically? And then what's that barrier of entry going to look like, right? Because I can't really see with this profession, I can't really see like, starting out 10 ped with this profession, right? Kind of like mining is right now. I would say maybe at the least 100 ped barrier to entry, could be higher. Are the ships that are currently in the game going to be able to mine these asteroids, and do all you need to do is get an attachment, attach it to your ship, and you're good to go? Or are you going to need a specific kind of mining ship that specifically does this itself? I think it would be kind of cool if there was a barrier to entry of 100, 200, 300 ped, probably a little more maybe, where it's a different kind of ship that doesn't exist. It's a specific mining ship. And then with that specific mining ship, you can then buy separate attachments to put guns on it or turrets or something to try and defend yourself. And then that way you can kind of defend yourself. But at the same time, if you wanted to be a pirate, you might have a lower barrier to entry to be a pirate while still having that barrier of entry being a little higher than, than like 100 ped, right? So I guess it really just depends on how all this ends up coming about. Again, Entropia Universe is a pretty obscure game. It's pretty hard to find information about it. MindArk really doesn't like giving too much information at once, or any information really, and so we probably won't fully know until this profession fully launches. But I'm really interested to see how this profession is going to work, how it's going to go, and I really hope that the barrier to entry to be a pirate isn't super low, but at the same time, I don't want it to be super high either, because I do want to try out this asteroid mining profession, but I also really want to be a pirate, because that would be really cool. I did play a little Eve before. I only have like 50 hours in the game, but I do know that doing dogfights in space and shooting down ships and, trying to do PvP and all that, it was really tough, but it was really fun. And I guess if Entropia can kind of find a similar balance to where the barrier of entry isn't too high, but not too low, but still keeping it kind of skill based and making it so that, you got to really kind of know what you're doing in order to be successful in stealing people's loot. I think it's a profession that can work really, really well as long as it's implemented in the right way. And with MindArk, that's kind of a coin flip, because I would say a lot of things in Entropia have flopped and failed and not done really well. And since this game's released, I don't think we really had a new profession like this drop. Because you could argue that taming was a profession but they kind of more so looked at that more as like a mini game almost from Mindark's perspective, from what I understand. I don't really consider when taming was a thing, I didn't really consider that much of a profession just because I don't think the pets really served like a whole lot of functionality, and I think that was the main issue, was just people didn't really see the value in having pets or taming these creatures really in the first place. There just really wasn't a lot of value there. But that was really the only profession that they tried to implement, or profession esque type thing that they tried to implement since the game even released. Um, I do think Mindark is going in a great direction of trying to add a new profession to the game, because I think it desperately needs a new profession. I actually think it desperately needs more than one profession, to be honest. I think if they added this new asteroid mining profession, and then if they could add one or two brand new professions that are completely different that make sense, I think that could be really huge. Now, just this one profession is going to add a lot more content to the game, and possibly a more potential for crafters and miners um and PvPers. I think it can add a lot more content in those aspects. Um, but man, it would be so cool if we had something like completely different. Like I said before, if we could have fishing globally in this game, think about how valuable having a boat would be. Because at least at one point there were boats in this game, I'm pretty sure. And just imagine being a boat crafter, even. I mean, this is definitely going to help the spaceship market, but I mean, I don't know. I just think it'd be so cool to be able to just get a boat, drive the boat on the water, and just do some fishing. Man, that'd be cool. But I am really excited to see how the spaceships, like the spaceship market, is going to react to this. Um, because there's a lot of spacecrafts or ships on the market in the auction house, but there's not a lot of variety, right? You can't just go in the auction house and buy a mothership. It's like just not really a thing from what I've seen. I mean, I've looked at the auction to see what kind of different ships there are, and there's really not a whole lot of variety. So I really hope that this new asteroid mining profession can really help the ship market, not just motherships, but just in general. You know, like even just like the ships that are already existing. Like who knows? Maybe you can attach an attachment to the Slipner at some point. I doubt that'll happen. Um, but you know, who knows? And I'm just really excited to see how this affects the ship market, because if this new profession can breed a whole healthy market of crafting and selling spaceships, motherships, regular ships, whatever, however you want to put it, that adds another aspect of content to the game too. So now you have asteroid mining, you have piracy being way more valuable to do and better content for piracy, and it can really help the crafters. You know, the crafters can now really benefit from, you know, getting more recipes for ships and crafting those ships and then selling those ships and potentially making a decent profit off of making and selling those ships. And I'm pretty excited to see how the market's going to kind of react to the ships as well. Because if the barrier to entry of being a pirate specifically is a little too high, um, then that might be a direction I'll go as well. Where, okay, maybe being a pirate might not be the best thing for me at my current level or the amount of ped that I have, but maybe I'll switch gears and do more crafting, and maybe crafting ships for people to either mine asteroids, or for piracy reasons, that might be a lot more valuable to do than, taking the risk of going out into space and being a pirate, or even the risk of going out into space and mining these asteroids. If there's a healthy market to craft more ships or craft ships in general for people, and if people are buying them left and right, and there's a good healthy market for it, then yeah, that might be a thing I'll go for, because I think that could be a huge potential moneymaker, or at least at the beginning, to do that. Now, the market might not adjust to that right away, but at some point near the beginning, it might, or it might not. The profession could flop, fail, kind of like everything else, you know, historically from Mind Arc, where a lot of things have failed. It just might be another flop as well, but we'll have to see. But I'm pretty sure, I'm not, I think this profession as well might be coming with the Unreal Engine update as well. I'm not 100% sure on that, so we might not see it until this game fully goes to Unreal Engine, but time will tell, and we'll kind of have to see with that. But I'm out of probes. We went through our 50 ped in the mining run. We finished the mining run. That's pretty much everything I wanted to say about the new profession. And, we probably got some time before this profession comes out, but I kind of wanted to talk about it, give my thoughts on this new asteroid space mining profession. And I think it's going to be interesting when it comes out. And I'm pretty interested to see how it's going to work, how it's going to do overall in the short and the long term. And I'm kind of curious just to see if it works well or not. But anyway, let's see how much we made on this mining run. So we went through all 50 ped. We had exactly 50 ped probes during this mining run. And now let's see what we got out of this run. Bro, this is why I love the F-106. People tell me all the time, bro, the F-106 is pointless. Why don't you just use the Terramaster? It's better. This is why. Bro, I went out with 50. We're up 24 ped. We made 25%. No, 50%. We made 50%, 49.56% or something. We made 50% this run. And people keep telling me, why don't you should use the Terramaster, it's better. This is why. You ain't gonna get the results like this with a Terramaster 4. I'm sorry, dude. It's not happening. You are not gonna get these kind of results with a Terramaster 4. Yes, the specs are similar. Yes, it's cheaper, whatever. But at the end of the day, I have 5 slots unlocked on this finder. I am at 4, sorry. I'm on tier 4 on this finder with depth enhancers on all of them. And just the efficiency is better. The fact that I can unlock tiers and use those tiers more often, because by the time you get to tier 4, tier 5, even with a decent Terramaster 4 or even Terramaster 5, I mean, the finder is going to be almost dead. And they're limited finders. There's a reason why the F-106 goes for almost 2,000 pet, because of these results. And I mean, come on, guys. I've been doing this for a while. I've been playing this game for, what has it been? 8 years now? Wow. I started 2017, like getting serious in this game. It's 2025, so 7-8 years. I've been doing this quite a bit now, guys, and this is why I use the F-106. Even the F-105 is not going to give you these results. With the F-105, you're going to be really, really, really lucky to make TT profit on a run. And this is also why I don't use amps, because I've done a lot of stress testing with amps. And if I ran this with an amp, the chances of me getting 74 ped would have actually been lower, because when you run with an amp, your chances of missing are actually higher. The only time an amp actually makes sense is when you're mining an area where you don't get consistent drops anyway, right? Like, for example, FOMA is a really good example of that. On FOMA, you could drop 10, 15 probes and get maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 hits if you're lucky. And they're going to be just your standard hits. They're not really going to be anything crazy regardless, unless you're running like some kind of insane, like high ass level miner, which even still, the F106 is actually considered a high level miner. Actually, the F106 can be also considered as an end game miner a little bit. Like, there's nothing wrong with being a super high level and using the F106. You're going to kill it because the efficiency is just way too good, especially if you're running depth enhancers. Like, imagine what this thing can do at tier 10 with all depth enhancers. Just think about that. If we did the same run the same way, but instead of tier 4, we were at tier 10 and had all depth enhancers, this could have easily been a 150 ped run with 50 ped. Just think about that, guys. Anyway, I'm done talking. The video's going on way too long anyway. Those are my thoughts on the new asteroid mining profession that's coming to Entropia. I want to know what you guys think about the new profession in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.